Hey y'all, thank you so much for joining me for another video. I really appreciate all the support I've been getting. Thank y'all so much. I say this every week, but it just amazes me. I want to put out a warning right now that what I'm going to be talking about is kind of sensitive and it's not really meant for little ears. I mean, I want to be careful on how I word things, but it may bring up questions that you're not ready to answer just yet to your little ones. So just make sure they're not in the room. But like I said, I'm going to be real careful how I word things. So it's not going to be too graphic or anything. But I want to expound on, I believe it was last week's video, about how I was feeling used. And this week being the first week that of my short-term disability, to straighten out my head, I've had time to think. And in having time to think, it's brought up memories that I had forgotten about. Not just memories with my ex, but actually memories from way back in my very early 20s. In fact, the memory I'm about to talk about, I was roughly 19. Excuse me. And it was rough dealing with that memory, but in comparing to another memory that was with my ex, it hurt even worse. Um, I felt very used throughout my life by guys that I had dated before I knew my ex. Um, Basically, I was something to be used and gotten pleasure from, had fun with in ways, and then once they were bored of me, just throw me away like a dirty paper towel. And that hurt because, of course, nobody wants to feel used. And I thought I had loved those guys when in actuality I was just wanting approval from a man because I never got approval from my father. So I was trying so hard in giving what any guy I dated wanted because I wanted their approval. I lost all respect for myself. I mean, I didn't think of it as not having respect for myself, but I didn't, because I was just wanting so bad for a guy to love me. Because that's how I felt I would be completed, is if I had the love of another man. And so, in them discarding me after they got what they wanted, that hurt. But what hurt worse is that I was treated similarly by my ex. I mean, he hung on to me with every ounce that he could because he threw control. I mean, he always said that he could never live without me. He always needed me. I was his better half. But yet, he would treat me like dirt. I mean, I was more property to him than anything. And I was his meal ticket even when we both worked. I was the one who was making the most money. I was the one who was trying to do better. And he didn't have to do much anywhere around the house, anywhere. So, of course, he wanted me around. And then, of course, I was his emotional punching bag. Whenever he had a bad day or he started thinking about his childhood or any number of things, I got the brunt end of it. But ultimately, and this is what really hurt bad, trying to think of a way to say this very delicately. I was basically just someone to use for pleasure, and even then, not very often. After the first couple of years of our marriage, things started going downhill, and I was just basically used when other means were no longer desirable. I hope that I'm making sense here, because I'm really trying to be discreet and not be graphic. But, and that hurt like anything. I woke up Monday morning with that thought, and it hurt like anything. And I could not shake that memory or that thought for the rest of the week. It kept popping up, even though I wasn't trying to think about it. My niece was in town, so I got to spend time with her, which was wonderful. And so I had a lot to distract me. But it kept popping up, and it kept hurting over and over. Because though all the guys I had ever dated, with the exception of one, was just out to use me in one way, shape, or form, mostly physical, it didn't hurt as bad. Because, I mean, it hurt, but not as bad, because there were things I did that, quite frankly, gave them the impression that they could. I mean, it doesn't give them the right to use me, but it was understandable how they came to those conclusions. But this was my husband, y'all. You know, you don't expect your husband to think of you in a way that you are being used. Sorry, guys. I had to do something real quick. But to feel used by your own spouse, that's brutal. And I kept playing that over and over in my head. That I was used. I was nothing. I was nothing more than a play doll, so to speak. You know, something to get his jollies off of and then be done. And that was a stab in the heart, because I loved him dearly. I mean, my daughter yesterday, when we were visiting, asked if, after he was removed and everything all was said and done, if I still miss him. The good times. And it made me tear up a little bit, as it's doing now. Because I did at first. Because I missed what I thought I had. And in fact, my daughter's mother-in-law, sweet lady, said it very succinctly. I missed what I thought I had. And then it made me angry, and like I told my daughter, it made me angry when I started thinking about it, because it was like, where was that? And that's when my daughter's mother-in-law said, you're angry at what you thought you married, what you thought he was. And then lo and behold, the real person came through a couple of years later. And I'm like, exactly. And that hurts. And that's what I want to encourage you. Because more often than not, you don't think you're going with an abuser at first. Because they treat you like gold. They're as sweet as sugar to you. Respect you. Treat you like royalty. And then after they get their hooks in you and they're comfortable, that's when the true self shows. And it hurts because all I've ever wanted was to be enough for someone. I know I'm not perfect. I know I'm not Miss America material. But I just wanted someone to love me for me. Just like anybody, all they want is for someone to love them for who they are. And I kept playing this over and over in my mind. All I'm good for is to being used. All I was being used by any guy I ever had. And I'm playing this over and over. And then it was like, I kept thinking, that's what I am. I am to be used. That's my definition. And then that's when God said, but that's not what I say of you. And I just cried at that point. Because it's like, no. When everybody else has fallen short and disappointed me or hurt me terribly, God has been right there. And even if you who are watching this don't believe in God, which that's fine, I'm reaching out to all, still know that that is not your definition. You're not defined by what others say. And you're not someone that is meant to be used. You may have been used by others. And you may have even known that you were being used, but you put up with it because you think that's all you're good for. You think that's all that you can get, and you don't want to be alone. Well, first off, you're better off alone than being used. And Secondly, that's not your worth. You are worth way more than your mistreatment. And you are worth way more than being used and tossed away like a dirty towel or a wet paper towel. That's not who you are. You are not the sum of all of your past experiences. You've got a future. In just the year's time since the day I called the police on my ex till now, a year and a month later, I have discovered so much about myself, and I have come so far. And I don't want you to compare how quickly I've come and how far I've come in a year, because everybody's trauma is different. How everybody processes trauma is different. But moving forward is what matters. Whether you're moving forward at the speed of a gazelle or the pace of a turtle, that's not what's important. What's important is that you just keep moving forward, one step at a time. You can't listen to all of these voices in your head that are telling you you're only worth being used, you're only worth being abused, no matter who you get, you're going to be abused anyway, so you might as well just stay in the situation. And that you're not anything unless you're in a relationship. I'm here to tell you that's all lies. I mean, I've only been divorced 6 months, so it's not like I'm even really looking for any relationship. But I've resolved that I'm not gonna be disrespected by any man anymore. Several videos back, I told you how I was propositioned by a man that belonged to an organization that I belonged to, and that he reached out to me on Facebook, and I thought it was just because we both belonged to the same organization. And he asked me for coffee when he comes back in town again, and I'm like, okay, coffee, no big deal. And in conversing, he propositioned me. We had only attended 3 meetings together. And we weren't even together, we happened to both attend 3 meetings. And had talked maybe a couple of times. So it's not like he knew me very well. And we had been talking that week over Facebook messaging. So here he is propositioning me. That's the height of disrespect. I mean, even if we had actually started dating, and then after several dates he would have asked me, I'd have still said no, because I'm a Christian. I believe that is something you wait for when you're married. But though admittedly I didn't always think that way, but I do now. I would not have been as offended. I'd have told him no and told him that that's the end of the conversation, that if it's brought up again, we're done. But I would have understood. We hardly knew each other, except on an acquaintance level at best. Well, I respected myself enough to end the conversation, unfriend him, and block him. Because I'm not going to deal with it anymore. It's. I respect myself enough to not give second chances like that. I mean, even if he had apologized and said, okay, I went too far, I'm sorry, that might have warranted a second chance. But he didn't even apologize. I said, look, I am not a piece of meat to get your dollies off of and throw away. I am a human being that is to be cared for and cared about. And he said, well, I can respect that. But he didn't apologize afterwards. So I deleted him and blocked him. Not that I thought high of myself, because I don't. Anybody that knows me knows I don't think very highly of myself at all. It's just that I'm respecting myself. I'm putting those boundaries up, and I'm sticking to them. And that's what I'm encouraging you to do. Make those boundaries and stick to them, because you respect yourself more and it feels so much better. I mean, after I blocked him and deleted and blocked him, I was angry for a while because it irritated the living crud out of me. Because it's like, really? You hardly know me and this is what you want out of me? But afterwards, when the dust settled and everything, that felt so good to put that boundary up and to have stuck to it and to know what my worth is. And I talk a lot about self-worth because I know what it's like to not have any self-worth. I know what it's like to feel like you're not going to amount to anything, that you're not worth loving, you're not worth having, you're not worth having a significant other of any type. I know what that's like. And to now put up boundaries and say, no, that's it. Done. You're not going any further. It's so wonderful. It feels glorious. Quite frankly, I said it before and I'm saying it again. If I never have another relationship, if I never get married, I'll be okay with that. I'm okay being single. Sure, I want to know what it's like to have a man truly love me for me in all of my imperfections, with all of my baggage. I'd love to know what that feels like. But I'm not going to compromise my values and my principles just to want to know what it feels like to be loved. Because if I have to compromise, then then the person's not really loving me. I mean, and when I say compromise, I'm not talking about looks. I'm talking about compromising on what I allow that person to treat me. I'm not saying I expect a guy to be all romantic and as if he stepped out of a Hallmark novel or Hallmark movie. No. I'm not expecting that. I do expect to be treated like a human being. Like a person that is to be loved and cherished and respected and not used. And that's what you should do. That's what I'm encouraging, is to allow yourself to be respected. Because that's another thing. I never allowed myself to be respected. Quite frankly, I didn't think that I was worth respecting. I had one guy that I dated that we got off to a rough start, but in the end he was truthful with me where he stood with things. And he did respect me. He respected my wishes. And he respected me. And we didn't work out because he just wasn't ready for any kind of commitment, and I was wanting a commitment. But it felt good to be respected. And that's why I went with my ex, because I thought my ex respected me. And instead, his true self came out, and all I was something to fulfill a need. And yet it hurts to even think about now. I get all of these voices in my head that say, why am I not enough? Well, it's not that I'm not enough. I'm just too much. Which is fine. I'm going to quote a line from a movie that is coming out the end of the month that I actually want to see. I forgot the name of the movie. It's a comedy of an unlikely friendship. And the premise is it's an older man who is evidently getting dementia, and he befriends this younger woman. She's about 30 something, maybe, late 30s, I estimate. And he wakes up one morning and finds her in bed, and he's thinking because of his dementia they did something. And she's like, oh no, your frail little body couldn't help all these bag of groceries. Meaning herself. Or this bag of groceries. And I'm like, that was so funny. But it's so fitting. Because it's not that you weren't enough. It's just they couldn't handle you. You were just too much. But instead of rising to be able to handle you, and lifting those weights so they can handle those groceries. Instead, they wimped out and decided to beat you down to their level instead of rising to yours. So, in the next week, think about that. It's not that you weren't enough for them. First of all, they weren't enough for you. And so they tried to drag you down to their level. But also, you were too much for them. They couldn't handle how awesome you were. So instead, they dragged you down. Which, that's what abusers do. That's what narcissists do. Which most abusers do have narcissistic ways if they're not full-fledged narcissists. But instead of, they will bring you down to their level instead of actually working to bring up themselves to your level. So think about that. You guys have a good week. Hopefully next Saturday I'll have a video on time. And you have a wonderful week. Stay blessed. As always, like, share, and hit the subscribe if you haven't already, and share away. You guys have a good week and stay blessed.